Deploying your desktop software isn't the easiest thing to do well. Either you go the simple route and just copy your files to another machine, or you try to create a complex installer file that's hard to understand and support. Fortunately, there's a third option. In this video, we're going to look at Squirrel, a simple to use installer that just works. We're going to see how easy it is to create an installer that also keeps our software up to date without being a huge headache. But first, if you're new to this channel, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. Sometimes that comes in the form of free videos like this one. Other times, it comes in the form of challenges that encourage you to push yourself. Those are released every Thursday here on this channel. Still other times, if you want to see how to put things all together, a course might be the right solution for you. Those are located at iamtimcorey.com. For these videos, if you're looking for the source code or for more resources, follow the link in the description to go to this video's blog post. Okay, let's get started in Visual Studio. If you watched my video on SQLite, this source code probably looks kind of familiar. In fact, it's a direct copy from the end of our SQLite demo video. So if you get the demo code for this, it's actually the end of the SQLite demo. So that's where we're starting from. I just wanted something to get us started that had a little more complexity than just a basic WinForm application. Now, if you're not familiar with SQLite, or if you don't want to be, that's fine. You don't have to be. This video is not about the actual technology used in this current application. I just wanted to have something that had a class library that had a few more references than normal. So we have like the reference to SQLite, and in fact, there's also some files that we'll need to bring as well. But what we're going to do with this source code right here is we're going to turn it into an installable executable. And in fact, we're going to create both an installer and an updater. And then what we'll do is we're going to update this source code after we've deployed it, after we've installed it. We're going to update the source code to make a change. And I'll show you what that change is going to be. It's really simple. But right now, if we add a person to this list, it does not refresh the list until we hit the refresh list button. We're going to change that so that when we fill this out and hit add person, it's going to add the person and refresh the list. So let's just say test user, and we're going to hit add person. Notice nothing happens, but if I hit refresh list, test user is now there. So that's our current form. We're going to create the application installer now. And then once we're done, we're going to update this application and see how the updater works. The other tweak we're going to do is right up here, it says SQLite demo form by Tim Corey. I'm going to add in here the version number. That way we can also see that the version has changed. Okay? So those are the two things we're going to modify in our actual base application besides adding the installer stuff. Okay, so those are kind of bonuses that we're going to do just to kind of show off what the installer is actually doing. But let's first start by talking about what Squirrel is. So normally when we think about installers, we think about setup.exe files or MSI files, or maybe even ClickOnce. Those are the typical installer type files. The problem is that MSI files and exe files are somewhat complicated to create. And there's not a really great, easy to use package out there that I've found at least. And now hopefully there is, and I just have missed it. And if you find one that you really like, let me know and I'll see if maybe I'll do even a video on it. But usually what happens is they are less than full featured. If you want the full featured version, you have to pay for it or things like that. And so I've just not found a great tool, especially not for also keeping your application up to date. Now you can just distribute your exe files, your DLL files, and that kind of works, but only if they have the .NET framework installed and only if there's a couple other things that go along with that, especially with dependencies that you have to worry about, and they don't update themselves. So the person behind Squirrel said, I just don't like these options. ClickOnce has some problems. EXEs and MSI files, they have their own problems. And so what he did was he created this tool called Squirrel. And Squirrel's goal is to meet the 80% of use cases. That means there's going to be some things on the edges that it doesn't do. And if you really need to have those things done, you have to go to the MSI level, or there's some other tools just coming out from Microsoft that will help. And I'm going to cover those in a future video. But for the 80%, which is I need to install an application, put a desktop icon on, have a start menu icon, and allow it to both run and update itself, that's what Squirrel does. And the really cool thing is you almost don't know it works, because it's just so seamless and behind the scenes. What happens when, and we'll see this when we install it, but what happens with the installer is it doesn't ask you any questions. You just run it and it launches the application. And behind the scenes, what it's done is download it, put it into your app settings, I believe, or app data, one of those app data, I think, folder. Which means it does not need to have a prompt. There's no UAC prompt, which is that security prompt for elevating permissions. You don't need to do that. It just installs behind the scenes, and it just runs. And then behind the scenes, when you are running your application, it can download a new version, and then the next time you run your application, it's just a new version. There's nothing you need to do. It just works. So there's really, really a little, almost no interaction the user has with the installer. They just think it just runs and it works, which is really helpful. So let's look at the GitHub page. This is open source. So it's on GitHub /squirrel for Windows. And this it's like ClickOnce, but works, which is a great tagline. So what this does is this creates our installer for us. So we're going to walk through the process today of how to use Squirrel. We're going to use the basics. But if you want some more information, more in-depth stuff, and there is a lot of add-ons or other tools you can use with Squirrel to make it even easier, then you can come here to github.com/squirrel/squirrel.windows and then look for more documentation or for more add-ons. Now, in the future, we'll be covering an even easier way to use Squirrel. A lot of what we'll do today is going to be a manual process. We're going to manually create some things and manually change some version numbers and those type of things. There's ways of automating this to make it super simple to do, but I want to show you how it works in the manual process first. And then in a future video, I'll show you how to automate these things. That way, you have an understanding of how it works, so that if it breaks, you can fix it. But there is ways to make it easier, because it does have about 5 different steps in order to deploy a new version, which is okay, but you really want to have those 5 steps automated, especially since they can be. So we'll talk through that as well. But for right now, let's start with the basics. So step 1 is on our WinForm application, we're going to right click on references and say manage NuGet packages. And we will add a new one, squirrel.windows. Let's search for that and select it. Now notice there's a lot of other Squirrel packages out here. If you want to integrate with Cake or Top Shelf, migrating from ClickOnce to Squirrel, a lot of stuff out here for those type of things, but we're going to do the squirrel.windows. The latest version right now is 1.9, so we'll hit install on that. And once that's done installing, we can go ahead and close out the package manager. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to create a place where the update runs. And so what this is going to be is going to be the place that checks for a new version. And if it's there, it's going to download it and install it, which is really simple. But we want to do it somewhere on startup, which is typical. Now, if you don't want your application to always update, if you want it to be a manual choice, you could create a button for this. But we're going to assume that you always want your application to update. Now, in a WinForm application, technically, program.cs static void main is where the application starts. You could, in theory, kick off the update right there. We're not going to. Instead, the form that first starts is this people form. And so this is really the visual start of our application. So behind the scenes, in our people form, we have the constructor where we first initialize the components, then load the people list, and then we're done loading the form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new method in here. Let's say private async. I want it to be asynchronous. We're going to return just task and say check for updates. So this is our update check. And what we'll do is we'll actually call this after we load the people list. And in here, we're going to make our call to check for updates. We'll create a using statement. Inside here, we'll say var manager equals new update manager. We'll do a control dot to add our using statement for Squirrel. And then in here, we're going to put our path to where the updates we found. Now, this is the tricky bit, okay? I'm going to put a place on my local hard drive. And the reason why is because we're going to go simple in this first video. I'm going to get into more complex things in future videos, including probably a better way of doing this, which is to put your updates on a web server somewhere. That makes more sense. However, when you're first getting started and you're first creating your first application or first installer, you don't want to spin up a whole web server just to have updates for your little test file, okay? And if this were a corporate network, you wouldn't need a web server either because you would just put it in one location that everyone has access to. So I'm going to put it into a location I'm going to pretend everyone has access to who would use this installer. Now, it's going to be local, not a network path. We don't have a whole network at home where I am recording. So we're just going to put let's do the @ symbol, and we'll say c:/temp/releases. Now, the reason I said the @ symbol before my string is because of these slashes right here. If I didn't have this @ symbol, it's going to treat these symbols as escape characters. And so I'd have to create my path like this. And that, I think, is just ugly. And I also can't copy and paste it and put it into Explorer. So I'm going to create it like this, like I want to, and put the @ symbol in front of it. And the @ symbol simply says everything inside here is just part of the string. It's not, there's no escape characters. Now, just so you know, if you were to put the $sign there as well, you still can put the curly braces and put code inside of curly braces. So it's not ignoring everything in a string, but it's ignoring those escape characters. All right, so let's close out our paren. And again, this is hard-coded. This is not the ideal solution here. This is kind of version 1 or beta version. We're just trying things out. And that's why we're putting it on my temp folder. Eventually, that's a network path or a web URL. And in fact, the documentation even has a demonstration of how to use GitHub to host your updates and then point this right to GitHub. So there's some really cool stuff you can do with it. We're going to do a simple route for today. Inside here, really simple, await manager.update app. That's it. Okay? So it's going to update the app and just await for that before it closes out. So that's all there is to checking for updates. Now you can put this code anywhere you want. For example, you could have it on a button click. You could call this as well and have it be an update button or something like that, or check for updates. But really, we want this to be transparent to the user. We don't want them thinking about it. Think about Google Chrome. When you use Chrome, you don't really realize it's updating. it just kind of happens. The only time you really know that Chrome is updating or has updated is either if there's a major feature change, or if you leave Chrome open for a really long time, it starts telling you, hey, you know what? It'd be great if you could reboot me so that I could install the new version. So those are the only times you really see Chrome update. Other than that, it kind of updates behind the scenes, and then every time you launch Chrome again, it's a newer version. Same thing here. It's going to just run behind the scenes, and when you open the application, it's going to check for an update. If there is, it will download the update, but not do anything else. And then when you close this application and relaunch it, it will launch the new version. So it's really just behind the scenes, seamless, and quiet. All right, now we have that done. The next thing we need to do is we go over to our properties and look at the assembly info. Now, this is not something you probably normally poke around in, but in here is a bunch of things, including, for example, the title of your assembly and all the rest. You can also get to this by going to the properties themselves and filling out most of this information. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the assembly version. I prefer to stay with the 1.0.0 instead of the final 0.0 version, the revision version. So we're going to stay right there with this assembly version. That's what we're going to start with. Okay? So this is the version number of our application. So now if we switch over to release mode, we're going to hit the build button, make sure it builds, and it does. And just to kind of prove that it does, we can come over to, if you right click on your WinForm project and go to Open Folder in File Explorer, let's go ahead and bring it over here. We can go to the bin folder and look at the release, and there you go. There's all of our build files, including our winform.exe application. Okay, now it starts off with a blank list of people. So we add a person, refresh the list, Tim Corey is there. And if we were to restart this, Tim Corey is still there. So it starts out with a blank database. That's just one of the things that we set up originally. So no problems there. Now that database will still have Tim Corey until we delete the database and start over. That's not something to worry about for this application. This is, again, just the installer. But I just kind of want to point that out. Okay, so now we know that's working. What we need to do is create a NuGet package. Now, you may be familiar with NuGet. Hopefully you are. NuGet is how we got Squirrel in the first place. We right-clicked on references and said, manage NuGet packages. And so we need to create our own NuGet package. And this is what Squirrel uses for updates. Now, NuGet files are actually pretty easy to create. And I will have a separate video on creating your own NuGet packages. But this is not really to that level yet. This is just for this little application for the updates. And so it's used a little differently. So let me show you how to create a NuGet package. So I'm going to show you this right here in the Microsoft Store. This is where I am right now. There's NuGet Package Explorer. I believe you can also download it not in the store, but this is pretty easy to get. NuGet Package Explorer, pretty easy to use. We'll go ahead and launch this. And when it does, it comes up like this. So it's a pretty simple little application to use. We're going to create a new NuGet package. So let's say new package. And this is our package when we start off. Pretty simple. So let's start off with editing it. So we'll click this icon right here to edit. Let's go ahead and zoom in a bit. So I'll do a control and my mouse will kind of make this a little larger just so that we can see it a little better. There we go. Hopefully that's readable. All right. So the first thing is our ID. This is the name of our application. We can't put spaces here. So we're going to call this, instead of these, let's call it SQLite demo, just to be consistent. Even though it's not really a demo, what we're deploying is a demo. Okay, and the version is 1.0.0. And the author, you can fill that in if you want. I'm sorry, the title. Whoops. There we go. There's the author. The title is optional if we want to put a title or not. So let's just call this the SQLite deployment demo. Okay. Again, you don't need to have that. You just need to have ID, version, and author. There are no dependencies we want to have, so we'll leave that blank. Let's modify the description, because right now it just says my package description. So let's call this the SQLite demo application to used to demonstrate deployment technology. Okay, we're good there. And that's it. So now you can hit the green check mark to save this. And now let's start adding some package contents. So the first thing we need to do, I'm going to drag this over here so you can see it. Let's see if I can't get both on the screen at the same time. All right, now we have both of these on the screen. The first thing I'm going to do before I drag files over, I'm going to right click on this package contents and say add folder. We're going to call it lib. And then right click on lib. I'm going to say add folder. We're going to call it net45. And these are important folders to have. Okay. So these two folders are the foundation where we're going to store everything inside of. So this is what the Squirrel expects from us. Okay. So now we can go into our WinForm UI folder. So our solution, then WinForm UI, then inside bin, release, and that's important, release. Then in here, we're going to grab everything. Well, almost everything. So I'm going to grab the whole thing. I'm going to highlight the whole thing. But then I come through, I'm going to remove any files that say PDB. So I'm going to hold my control key and unselect them. So let's go through and just look and remove any PDB files that we find. Okay, there we go. Now the PDB is used for debugging your application. We don't want that in our installer. We want to keep those separate because they could provide some source code to a user that allows them to reverse engineer a little easier and really debug our application. Not something we want the end user doing. So let's keep those away from the end user. But otherwise, everything in the release folder, I'm going to simply click and drag over into the net45 folder. There we go. We have now created our full NuGet file. So that's everything we need. We have both our package metadata, which is our ID, our version, our title, author, description, no dependencies. And then over here, actual contents, which essentially is just going to zip this whole thing up. And it's going to create a folder called lib inside there, a net45 folder. Inside there, it's going to have all these files, including winformui.exe. Okay, and that'll be our executable. So let's save this. And the general rule of thumb here of where to save this is let's put it right in our, let's go here to where our location is. And inside of where our solution is essentially, which is this root folder here called demploy demo. I really want to change that, but that's okay. So we're going to save it right here. And the name it gives us is SQLite demo.1.0.0.nupkick. So that's the NuGet package file. That's the extension. And it's giving us a version number of 1.0.0. We want to keep that. That way, when we go to the next version, we can just increment this right here and it will be obvious which version each of these packages is. So let's hit save on this. So now it's saved in the location where our project is. There it is right there. Notice it's about 1 megabyte. That's because it has all those files inside of it. Now I'm going to drag these off a screen temporarily, just so that we can be over here. But we're going to come back to those in just a minute. But instead, we're going to go to the Package Management Console. Now, if you don't have this Package Management Console, it's one of your options down here. no problem. It is available by going to the View and then going to Other Windows. And then in here is the Package Management Console. And it's right there. So Package Management Console. Okay, so we're going to open this up and we need to run a command line prompt or command in order to get this ready for release. So we start with Squirrel. Let's actually see if we can't. There we go. So we start with Squirrel and we do a space and then 2 dashes and say releaseify. Okay, releaseify. And then we have our name. So SQLite demo.1.0.0.nupkick. Okay, we make sure that's the right one. So let's go over here and just make sure. So SQLite demo.1.0.0.nupkg. So there we go. So there's our releaseify. We're getting that ready for release. Okay, we hit enter. We wait for it, and it should be done, and it is. And we come back over here now. Notice there's one extra folder. It's called releases. We open this up. We now have setup.exe, setup.msi, and our full NuGet package file. All right, so that's really it. We've now created our release package. And in fact, what we want to do is we want to run this setup.exe. Not yet, but we're going to. And then from there, we'll be able to see our file install, run it, and then do our updates. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to minimize this. And we're going to have just my desktop here. Now, this is not my primary desktop. I have a secondary desktop that I do my recording on just because it's cleaner this way. So when I run this executable, let's go ahead and I'm going to copy this out. I'm going to paste it right here. Now, it's going to install it probably to my primary desktop, but we'll see. And if so, we're going to drag it across. But this is the whole process for installing my application now. Now, this is where you install it on your eventual machine, okay? Now, before we do this, one last thing I almost forgot. I want to grab these files. I'm going to copy them. And I'm going to go to, let's actually open a new window. There we go. And in here, I have this releases folder. This is where I said C temp releases. This is where I said the updates would be. I want to paste that in here. This is standing in as my network location or my web server that's serving these files. Okay, this is where this would be. Okay, so this is the location where it's going to get the updates from. So now the user just runs the setup.exe. In fact, let's go ahead and run this. Let's just open it. Wait just a second. And let it install. It's thinking about it. Oh, it's already done. Sorry, I missed it. It's that fast, okay? So now if we were to, that's the icon that I install on desktop. Notice it's really ugly, but that's okay. We can update it in the future. But if we run this, it should run our full application. And we have a problem. So I looked at this real quick. I just paused the video and looked at it because it should be launching right now. In fact, it is launching right now. It's just that it's crashing. And so we have a bug in our first application, which is awesome. But instead of going back and showing you the real way and not showing you any problems or errors, I decided instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a real life problem. Okay, so this is a problem right out of the gate in that it won't launch. If I open up an event viewer, it says that it crashed because it can't find a SQLite file. So this is one of those, not bugs. This is one of those things with SQLite that we have to work with. And that is if we go to, let's pull over here. This is the WinForm project. In fact, here's the the solution. If we go WinForm UI bin release, we have the x64 and x86 folders. Inside there is the SQLite.interop.dll. That's very important. So it was saying I can't find that interop DLL. I'm thinking, well, it should be there. So let's open up our SQLite demo 1.0 and look at, there's nothing inside those folders. When I clicked and dragged them over, it brought the folder, but not the things below the folder. So this is a good learning experience. So let's grab a 64-bit DLL and we'll put that in that folder. And we'll go to the x86 and put it in the x86 folder. And that should solve that problem. So what do you do now? Well, you hit save and you close out this package. I'll bring this over. And what we're going to do is this releases folder, which this is actually here on the desktop. You can go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to do it. It'll probably be off screen, but that's okay. I'm going to uninstall the application. So it's called SQLite demo. And in fact, let's just drag it over here. So there you go. So there's the SQLite deployment demo. I just hit uninstall. Ironically, it does give you a UAC prompt for uninstalling when it didn't for installing. But that's all there is to it. The icon goes away and everything is off the disk now. So now let's go back to our application. And in here, a couple things we need to do. First of all, before we go there, let's go to our temp folder. So let's grab this. And then inside of releases, let's go ahead and delete everything there. I'll pull that off. And now that we're done all this, we can go ahead and releaseify the same exact version. I've saved the updated NuGet file. Go ahead and releaseify the exact same version. It should go ahead and create that for us. Now let's just verify it did that. So go to releases, and there we go. So there's our new files. They have been updated as of just a minute ago. So I will copy all of these. I'm going to go to the temp folder where they live. Let's bring that over here and we'll paste that in. This is where all the updates come in as well. So this is where you can run the update from. So let's go ahead and minimize all of this and try this all again. I'll go ahead and launch the setup.exe file. So launching setup.exe, and right away it launches. It's already done. Now, that to me is incredible. Now let's drag the icon over here so you can see as well. There's the icon. This is the 1.0.0 version of our application. Now notice it has Tim Corey in the list. That's because it grabbed that file in the release folder. So we really should have kept it as an empty file or redone the file so that it was empty, but that's okay. It's not, the end of the world, especially not for this demo. But it does work. So Jane Smith, we can add, refresh. Now Jane is in the list as well. Okay, so we're good to go. Now let's change some code. So let's go over here. I'm going to unpin that. I'm going to shrink back down to a more reasonable size for our font because that was just crazy big for our font on the form itself. Now let's make a couple of tweaks. First of all, I wanted to see that version number up here. So in the code behind, let's go ahead and add a method called private void add version number. And all it's going to do is going to add a version number to whatever text we already have in the text for the form. So the people form .text, which is this right here, we're going to add some new text. Now, getting the version number is actually a little more complicated than just saying, give me version number. So let's start with system.reflection.assembly, let's call it assembly equals system.reflection.assembly.get executing assembly. And then the file version info. So that's using system.diagnostics. So file version info. And let's just call this version info equals file version info dot get version info for assembly dot location. Okay, so that's getting the assembly information for us. So that'll have all we need, and now we can say is people form dot text. I think it's dot text. Let's look real quick. So the people form, the property for that should be dot text. All right. So instead of, that's why this, not people form, this. So this dot text plus equals, we're going to add it to the end. And we'll say space, let's do our $sign first. Say space, V, and then let's do a V dot and then the version number. So do our curly brace and then say version info dot file version. Okay. And then we can put a semicolon at the end of that. And that should add our version number on. Let's just make sure it does. We're in release mode. That's okay. It's going to yell at us and say, hey, do you want to, stop debugging? Let's continue debugging for now. So there we go. SQLite demo form by Tim Corey version 1.0.0. Perfect. So we got a new version there. So now let's call that good. So how do we do an update? So the first thing we need to do is after you've updated our code, make sure you're in release mode. Now, normally when you're working on an application and debugging it, you want to be in debug mode. The difference here is debug mode is designed for you to be debugging, and so you can do things like look back at old variables. When you're in release mode, it acts much more like it would in production, and so things like garbage collection happens right away, possibly, and so you might lose what variables are, what the data was in the variables, if those variables are out of scope now. So debug is definitely the way to go normally. But once you are ready to deploy, change over to release mode. Next, go to your properties and open up that assembly info.cs. Come down and change your version number. Now, how you change your version number is up to you. You could do it based upon, every time I make a change, I modify this last number here. And then these are minor changes, minor overall changes, and this is a major change. That's kind of typical, but it's up to you how you do it. You could say, this is already 2.0 because it's such a massive change. It's up to you. But make your change and go ahead and hit save. Okay. And then you want to make sure that you do a build solution. Okay. That's important. Okay, so the next step, once you've done a build on this, is to come back over to your Package Explorer, open up your package, your NuGet package, go to Edit, change the version number here. Okay, that's very important. Change the version number and hit the check mark. Then open up this right here. What we're going to want to do is let's go over and open up this folder in File Explorer. I'm going to minimize this. And now you're going to find all the files that have changed in the release folder. So now we know the only file that's really changed is our winform.exe. And just to be on the safe side, it hasn't changed. But just to be on the safe side, we'll grab the config file as well. So click on those, drag them over here. Oops, I put in the wrong level. So you need to drag them. Here, it's probably easiest to do this. Delete, and we'll delete one more time. And then find the folder itself. So hover over net45 and release, and it's going to say, do you want to replace? And you say yes, and that's all the files we need to update. If we had made changes to our class library, we'd need to grab that DLL as well. Okay, so you can just look by the modified date and see which ones have been modified. Typically, it's just the exe and any DLLs that are associated with what you have created, not, for example, the Squirrel DLL or any of your NuGet Package DLLs. So you drag those over. We'll close that out. And now don't hit save, do File Save As, save the same location, but notice because we changed the version number, and this is great, it actually changed our file name when we did Save As. And so you just hit save, and it saves as a new version number, 1.0.1. We can now close that out. We can open back up our SQLite and open up our package management console. Let's go ahead and make this a little larger again. And we have this releaseify already here for our version 1.0. But now let's go ahead and change this to 1.0.1 and hit enter. And once that completes, we can go ahead and zoom back out a little bit more here. And we can look at that folder and look at our releases. Notice now that there is a 1.0 full package, a 1.0.1 full, and a 1.0.1 delta. And so that delta, notice that the file size, if you can see that, it's only 12 kilobytes. The full package is 2 megabytes, over 2 megabytes. But the delta is just that difference, which is 12 kilobytes. So something really, really small. So now we can take these new files, which I just copy the whole thing, but it's up to you if you want to copy the whole thing or not. And then we'll go over to that folder that we store them in, ctemp, and I'll just paste and overwrite everything. So now this is the simulating the network location or the web location central location where our updates are located. And that's really it. Now, if we run this application, notice it does not say a version number here. There's no version number at all. So you're thinking, well when's it going to update? It's not. Close it out, start it again. Version 1.0.1. In the background, when we first launched the application, it downloaded the new version, but waited until we restarted our application. When we did, it gave us the new version of our application. So that's really it. You have that setup.exe file. You have the location where you have all your NuGet packages for your deltas and your full versions. And then you just run your application and it updates as needed. So this is how you can make really rapid updates to your application and deploy them with very, very little work. Now, yes, there are steps to be made. The steps include, first of all, modifying your application, making your change, changing the release mode and building, making sure you change your assembly version to a new version, creating, going to your NuGet package, opening it up, making the change to the version, and then putting the new code or new files in your net45 folder, and then doing the releaseify, and then copying those files over to your network location. Yes, that's a lot of steps. But where in there was it complicated? It's not. It's always predictable what you have to do. And so this is where I challenge you to do next in your progression of learning this, is once you kind of get a handle on this and understand what's happening, the next step is to automate this. Because this should be just part of a build process. So that when you make your changes and you say, you know what, yes, we're ready to release, then you would change your assembly version and then let your build process say, oh, there's a new version, make the new package, put the new files in it, change the version number, run the releaseify, move those releaseify files into the network location, and you're good to go. So really what should happen is once you have this build process down, it should be a matter of just a small little change, changing your version number to the right version, and then everything else just happens. Okay, so that's the end goal. But for now, this process is pretty straightforward. Okay, there's not a whole lot here that's complicated. There's not a whole lot here that causes you issues. It just kind of works. Okay, so hopefully this kind of showed you how you can very easily deploy your application to another machine and keep it updated without a whole lot of work on your part. This does work a lot like modern applications, like, for example, Google Chrome, where it installs per user so it can get around the idea of having those UAC prompts. The prompt that says, do you want to elevate your security in order to install this? So it doesn't install for every person on the machine. If you want to, there's ways of doing that. But for the most part, the focus of this installer is getting your application onto another machine, get it running with as little prompts, as little interaction as possible. Just get it to work. And so one of the things that people often ask for is, well, can I have prompts? Can I say where it should be installed and all this kind of stuff? And the answer is no. For the most part, this is what it is. It just does one thing really well. So if you want some more advanced stuff, this might not be a solution for you. But for most cases, this just works. It's very quick. It's very easy to do. And it brings you to that next level in your application deployment. Now, I was going to show you how to make it automatically refresh. I think I'm going to leave that for you. So take the finished source code from this video and download it and see if you can't get it to, first of all, install the way it is, and then take it to the next level by adding another version number with the updated code and make sure that it works for you. Okay? So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll try and get to them as soon as possible. All right, thank you for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.